So before I read this piece, I have to explain who some of the characters are. So I will share with you that the book starts off with an acorn that grows into a large tree. And I've discovered that the younger my audience members, the more interested they are in the exact dimensions of the tree at any point in the story. So at this point that I'm going to read to you in the story, the tree is like under a year old and is probably about this tall and this big around. And it is friends with a number of grass that coexist in the same community. And Dant is one of the names of the grass. And probably tree's closest friend at this point is a grass named Univervia. Which I love the name, but it is actually the Latin name of that species of grass, and it's Mexican sprangle grass, which is fun to say, but Mexican sprangle grass is a California native, and it grows up to be probably about this tall when it's done, and it's super thin and lacy. It's very delicate and ethereal looking. So at this point, this specific Mexican sprangle brush is this big. In other words, significantly taller than tree, right? Not that anyone's watching, but of course they are, right? Suddenly Dant made the threat. "We will root choke you, Univervia. You will be dead in 7 days' time if you do not choose us over tree." Slender and proud, waving over the sturdier Dant, Univervia repeated himself, "I love my herd. I love tree. There is no choice to be made." And slow as grief, the roots began the war. Eventually, Dant passed several friendly grass and wrapped a key root around Univervia's taproot. Then Dant began to tighten. At first there was no effect, but within days, Univervia began to droop. Tree was beside himself. Finally, Tree burst out, "I will stop speaking to Univervia. Do not kill Univervia, I promise." But Dant, enjoying the heat of power, declined in a growly voice. "This is not between us and you. You are an outsider. This has to do with Univervia's loyalty to us. Univervia must choose us over you." Obdurate, Univervia spoke in a cramped and narrow voice. "I choose both." And while the herd of grass was intensely engaged in this battle, wondering if Dant would do such a heinous thing to his sibling blade that everyone knew Dant had loved so much, a second herd of deer was on the hoof, wandering through the meadow. The grass had known the prickly unease of deer herds before. Their hooves severed the top portions of grass off and crushed young and old plants, causing the need to grow back over a week's time. And they ate the tops of plants, and sometimes they uprooted grass, and that was just that. They were blandly violent, oblivious to that which they caused. A velvety brown mouth came near the patch of grass, which included Dant, Vicium, and Univervia. A big bite took out Dant and Dant's pack of friends, severing them off at an inch above the roots. There was a universal shriek as the creature began grinding them down into food, and the silence of a noble death thereafter. Dant, suffering a mortal wound, clung to the earth by his roots, shivering at the disappearance of 90% of his stem and blades. Univervia spoke softly. "Dant, you are still alive. Don't fall asleep. Don't give up. Grow, grow. You can heal and thrive." Shocked to the core by kindness from Univervia, after having put it under a grass fatwa, Dant cried. Univervia continued, "Grow, grow." And Dant clung to the command and put out a wish to form cells along the severed edge, oozing precious wetness into the air. Dant began to reconstruct. And in that moment, the deer's mouth came back in and neatly chomped out half of Univervia. Tree was electrified. It felt like his own core had been cleaved. To Tree's surprise, it could still feel the blade of Univervia that was on the deer's tongue. And the feelings that came at Tree were fast, intense, and surprising. The whole blade lay languid, surrendering as the tongue mashed the strands of grass up to the roof of the doe's mouth. Then, the deer twisted the grass sideways and ground teeth into the grass. As the grass was destroyed, each cell popped and gave shots of grass life force into the hungry deer in little pops of ecstatic release. The whole thing happened as swiftly as a string of firecrackers going off into light and smoke, leaving behind a dull residue that gave no sense of the evanescent beauty that had been enchanting the air only moments before. Tree felt this chunk of Univervia embrace willful dissolution, and then suddenly, all these little pieces that had been integrated into Univervia were separated into something like Ananda, the joy which powers the universe. And then the grass was deer. Tree looked at the deer with newfound respect. On a fundamental level, the animal was grass. The deer itself was plant. Boggled by the insight, Tree could only lie still and erect and watch the marauding deer move on. The cry of the half of Univervia which remained tore into Tree like watching a lover plunge off a cliff. Tree gasped out as a last-ditch effort, "Univervia!" And Univervia grasped at the contact. "Am I alive?" the shortened grass shrieked. Relieved to have made contact, to have heard a voice, Tree spoke with the majesty of a grown tree, completely silencing the entire bustling herd of grass. "You are still here, and you will grow." So the next piece is about a different kind of eating, and it's shorter. This chapter is called Acorn People. In the ensuing years, Tehui, Helik, and their friends and relatives came many times to harvest Tree's acorns. Each time Tehui stood looking at Tree before and after. Tree had this feeling that he was special to Tehui, but could not say how or why, but he was certain of this. For Tehui, Tree represented a moment in time with her father, when he told her about oaks and acorns and people, and she heard him deeply, and it stayed planted in her heart. For Tree, these moments of ritual contact felt fleeting in Tree time, and he was never able to decipher the language or emotion from the human, except for a vague feeling of appreciation and affection. One year Tehui came, and Tree noted that compared to how she used to look, she seemed horribly distorted. Sadly, Tree wondered what kind of wasp would make such an enormous gall on such a small human. And Tree wondered if the human would survive until the larvae inside the gall either were eaten or ate their own way free to become independent wasps. Whenever she came by the path to go to the creek or to cross over to the other hillside or any such thing, he observed the spectacularly swift growth of the gall, which seemed to occupy her entire middle third. However, she did not happen to come by during the rainy season, and the next time he saw her, she had a small human tied in some kind of basket on her back. Aghast, Tree realized that inside the gall had been her own offspring. Furthermore, days later, when the human infant began to cry, the woman sat down, took the baby out of the back basket, and held it up to her chest. Even from 100 yards away, it was clear to Tree that she was feeding the child her own sap. This bizarre life cycle completely flummoxed Tree, and Tree attempted to retreat from thinking about it. But then Tehui took something out of a purse attached to her waist, a thick flatbread made of crushed, bleached, and boiled acorns. And Tree had to acknowledge that now Eve was a part of this little baby through the method of woman ingesting tree and baby ingesting woman. She put the baby upon her shoulder, patting his back. The baby spit up some milk, and the woman was ready. She had a few sycamore leaves, tender fuzzy on one side, for cleanup. Quickly she packed up the now happy child, laying in some dried rose petals against the baby's bottom before swaddling him, and resumed her activities, stopping by to caress Tree's trunk, further underlining her familial claims upon Eve. However, Tree had some momentous experiences in the last year, more momentous than becoming part of the human community. For some of these acorns had sprouted. Eve had told the little trees that the hot light would return, and they had rejoiced. But the sprouts were all beneath the growing canopy of each tree, so Tree could see the little ones struggling to endure in the shade. Then, during a drought, deer had uprooted and eaten every one. And Tree had become old enough to know that few acorns become tree, but still it had been a brief and passionate voyage. Grief echoed like a distant bell, repeating. And my last piece I'll read is the very last paragraph. So the little boy speaking is named Enzo. And Enzo's probably about 8 or 9 right now. It was very cold. The stars looked very far away. The light blinked off in his parents' room. The earth spun. He knew dawn would come. "Oh, Tree," he said out loud. Tree heard. For this little plant, for himself, his core opened like a new leaf, and a burst of memories came, flash cut at the speed of dragonfly light, then stretching to slow. Una Vervia, tall and green. Maria Marta in the embrace of her lover. Hot light. The glint of the moon through storm clouds. Warm dirt. Groundwater in his furthest root tips. The weight of acorns so ripe, dropping off of branches. the urge to grow, the expectation of 100 days times 3 for 100 times, 2, 3, 4, even 5. Then suddenly the shock of one night left, a memory of rain pit-pattering on his leaves, the scent of wet from his duff, the first time he felt the piercing loneliness from little Enzo, and the simple happiness it gave Tree to drop joy into the boy's young core, the sweetness of receiving the child's love. Ah, that was it. That was the underlying melody in every thought and sensation, via every rock and plant and animal and sky and star, inside the water, from the dirt, through the light. And he found the exact words to speak just before Enzo fell into sleep. Tree told Enzo, "Only love lasts." Tree spoke clearly, "Grow and plant an acorn." So this is my favorite part of these events, is I love to open up to questions and answers. But before I do, I want to share 2 things with you. Number one of which, one thing, actually I can count. One thing which is, do any of you know Andy Lipkiss locally? Yeah. He founded Tree People back when he was a teenager and full of beans. And ever since then, for decades, he's been serving Los Angeles County and beyond by planting trees and teaching about their importance. And I learned from Andy, every time he goes into a group, he asks the new people that he meets, what is your favorite tree? What is the forest or plant or individual tree of your life? What's your earliest memory tree that resonates with you personally? And he said in over 40, I guess maybe 50, almost 50 years of asking this question, he's never found anyone that doesn't have a tree that's their tree. So if any of you would like to share with me about your tree before we branch off, so to speak, into questions, I can't help but the tree language starts popping up, right? So if any of you have a tree story, I'd like 2 or 3 before we open to questions. That was your favorite tree when you're growing.
I do.
Patricia.
Funny you should mention that, because you know, I was born and raised in Brazil. You know, a lot of plantation, a lot of trees, and you know, my parents had a summer home, and there was this huge tree. And I used to drive my parents crazy because I loved to climb trees. But there was this one tree, and I remember it as a 9-year-old, you know, with all of my insecurities, I felt that that one tree was always there for me. You know, I broke my arm on that tree.
Oh.
I climbed the tree, and my foot somehow got caught in between 2 branches. I was completely stuck there, hanging right upside down, nobody around to help me. I managed to loosen my foot from in between the branches, and I promptly fell on the ground, bracing myself with one arm so as I don't bang my head, right? Instinct. And I broke my arm, and I was as happy as can be. You know, I didn't feel the pain. I ran home and I said, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy, I think I broke my arm." And I felt no, in hindsight, I really felt no pain. It was, to me, it was just like the most normal thing in the whole world.
Wow.
You know?
Well, you had the tree looking out for you, right?
Yeah, well.
I'm glad you got your arm fixed.
You know, my mother was a nurse, so she knew exactly where to
right?
take me.
Thank you. Yes.
I have, so the tree for me was a loquat tree. It was this tree that was in my grandparents' front yard, and I grew up in the house behind my grandparents. So we used to climb this tree all the time and eat many loquats. And when I moved away, I came home after being away from home for a few years, and the tree was, my dad would overdo stuff. So he hired somebody to prune the tree, and they killed this tree. They pruned it so badly. And time passed, and the tree was on its side. And I was so angry with him, and I you know, yelled at my father, "You can't do this and all this." And I just thought, I can't leave the tree there. So I have that tree now. It's in my living room.
Wow.
I had the base cut clean, and this metal stand with the whole, so I have the tree basically, it is like an art sculpture in my living room. And it's been there for, I don't know, 25 years or so.
Wow.
So whenever family members come over, they get a kick out of it. It's this tree, and I say, remember the low-cut tree in Granddad's yard? Oh, and they all have their memories and connections with this tree. So it's
That's
a low-cut
lovely.
tree.
Yes?
It occurred to me as you were talking that the tree is actually two trees. The tree below the ground is a tree. The tree above the ground is a tree. And we talk about the tree as though its real identity is what's above the ground. But the tree below is like the Jungian subconscious or something. It's a whole system that is as alive as the tree above. The tree above is completely dependent on the life of the tree below. But we are so involved with our, like you say, the ego, which is what we're consciously, constantly, doing and acting, that we pretend or we don't think about or we ignore the other tree. And somehow you do that, it seems to me. We don't tell stories about the life of the tree below. We tell stories about the life that's in the sun and the da. That's what I was thinking. It kept coming back to me that way.
Well, it's interesting because in the beginning of the book, when the acorn first sprouts, the biggest thing is oaks in particular, the style of growth they do is a big taproot. That's the first thing they put out, and it's the tree starts growing during a really bad drought, which is every year's got a lot of dry in California, right? And so you're really questioning in the first chapters, is that taproot going to hit groundwater before this little plant kicks the bucket, right? So that root is incredibly essential to the tree's experience. And another thing that happens in the book that I feel like ties into what you're saying is there's an earthquake. And if you're a tree, being in your place and being king or queen of all your survey, right, that's your thing. So when the tree gets knocked sideways from the earthquake, all of its roots are moved, and it's able to continue to reroot and grow and hang in there. But it's so traumatic because, as you say, it's like the equally important connection to the ground is to the sky. It can't coexist. It can't live without that half of itself. So it's a really good point. So, yes.
For me, I have a memory of this grove of eucalyptus trees that I grew up in LA, but my house was the last house, and then there was this turnip field. This is before all the land was filled in, before the 5 freeway was built during the San Fernando Valley. And we used to go out there and have turnip fights, right? So after they harvested the turnips, whatever they didn't harvest would gradually rot, right? Get soft enough where we could throw it at each other and not kill each other, right? But we would hide in the eucalyptus. They planted these eucalyptus trees, I think, as a windbreak or something.
Right,
I don't know.
right.
But anyway, there was this grove of them, and we would just hide in there and throw rotten turnips at each other. And I have a very fond memory.
Well, I also want to open up the room to questions if you have any about the book or the different cultures that are woven into the book. Because trust me, there's a lot of research that went into this. It was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. But or if you have other tree stories, like whatever you like. Yes.
How do you know you're not a Buddhist?
Wow! Wow, that's the best cone I've ever heard. I think my sister thinks I'm a secret Buddhist. I think that as someone who studied history and works with a lot of scientists, I have an absolute phobia of not being accurate about things. You know what I mean? Like getting the right dates for everything in the book. Like I was completely psychotic with the research, right? So if I were to say I were any kind of religion, or I would have to be, or any kind of philosophical approach to life, whichever way you want to identify Buddhism as, right? I'd have to feel that I completely embody that, to call myself that. And I feel that there are strong Buddhist themes in my emotional world and how I look at things and how I feel and think, but I wouldn't feel it was appropriate for me to lay claim to that unless I were practicing and you know, part of the world and doing the reading and being committed on that level. So I've got Buddhist alignment or a Buddhist crush, right? Yeah. So, and the whole religious thing is fascinating because one of the other invitations I got this year was one of my best friends up in Sacramento where I moved. Turns out her other best friend is the rabbi of her synagogue. So I met the rabbi one evening, and she proudly said, "Oh, well, you should come speak at my temple, at our congregation, at Buddhist New Year of the Trees. I mean, excuse me, Jewish New Year of the Trees," which I didn't even know was a thing, right? So what's really interesting is they do it by the moon, and it usually falls around February-ish. But if you look at when it's a good time to plant native plants in California, it's November, December, January, February, and then you're done. So in other words, the Israeli historic tradition of when their New Year's falls is when it would be a good time for us to plant our trees, right? So when I went and spoke there, first of all, there was a lady who was a Holocaust survivor who had a great tree story if you guys want to hear it. But second of all, my daughter felt so much kinship with the little old ladies and little old men in the community who were all doting on her because her own grandmother's deceased, that she got in the car and said, "I'm Jewish. I love these people." She goes, "They're smart and they talk about ideas." She goes, "I had more fun tonight with the old people than I've had all year in elementary school." So I called up the rabbi and I said, "I know you don't believe in converting people, but I think you have a convert. Come by anytime." So I guess I'm experiencing that, like, because of this book, I get invited into communities and people connect with it in different ways. It's really sweet. And as to the little old lady who's a Holocaust survivor, you guys, her tree story had us on the floor. She survived the Holocaust, God save her, and made her way to Israel and was living on a kibbutz. And the first thing outside the kibbutz was an apricot tree that looked like it was dead. And she'd seen enough of that, thank you very much. So she and her fellow kibbutzim said, "We're going to save the tree." So they watered it, they researched, they fed it by compost, they talked to it, they prayed over it, and it burst into bloom and it had apricots. So now I cannot eat apricot or apricot jam with thinking of this little baby and, like, you know, tearing up because they saved the apricot, and I see it as such a powerful resurgence of life. And that word ananda that I used in the book, the Sanskrit word that means joy, I love the idea that you can't have a functional universe without joy. Because joy is what helps us survive the worst things in life and get up and do it again, right? And you can find joy by connection in a sangha, or raising kids, or in the forest, or cooking, or whatever it is. But that's what keeps us alive and keeps life going. Do you have any fun questions about the book? Any intellectual geeks out there who are like, "Oh, why did you pick this part of the Spanish?" Yes.
I have a confession. This is my sister. Yes, she is a Buddhist, okay?
Thank you.
And so a lot of you don't know me, but I come here regularly on Wednesdays, and I come sometimes on Sundays. And so she gave me this book to read, and I thought, oh, geez, I guess I have to read this. And so I sat down, and I'm very busy. But I became enthralled, and then every day I would go do my thing, and I would rush back to read the book a little bit more. And this was for a while, and then I started reading more slowly because it was getting near the end, and then I cried at the end. And I started giving this book out at the jails where I work. And I could not believe the response and the joy that this book brought to so many inmates. And so, unfortunately, it's rather expensive for me, but it's money I'm more than happy to spend, and I just want to say thank you for your gift.
Thank you. Well, I'm very honored that it's being read in the jail because as someone who's an outdoor person, I can't think of anything harder than not being able to go out of doors or into a garden. Right? So one of the inmates that my sister worked with was talking in a group, and they said, "What is this book? Why do you like this book? Why are you reading this book?" And he said to him it was about freedom. And I thought, why is it about freedom? I thought, because it's about being outdoors and being, part of nature. So, that was really powerful to me that he would say that. And I have a tiny paragraph about freedom if you're interested.
Yes.
Or, I don't know? Okay. Of course, I didn't look it up in advance. You have to bear with me while I find it. There's a character who shows up halfway through the book named Maria Marta, and she is a ranchera's daughter. So, hold on. I don't know if I can find it. It's I know sort of where it is. Oh, wait.
Do you have an index in the book?
No, and I wish I did. But you know what people get really mad at that I didn't do? Is that I didn't include the list of every book I used as research. Because what happens is people get obsessed and they want to go like, well, where'd you find that out? How is that true, right? The one that nearly killed me is right when I thought I was ready to go to print, my child's piano teacher, who's a very brilliant woman, right? She looks at me and she goes, there weren't pianos in the 1820s in LA. You can't do that. And I'm like, yes, there were. She goes, prove it. So I want you to know, like, I called up every museum, and what I found is a lot of the places you go, like Alvera Street or whatever, and there's a piano sitting right there. What happened is Alvera Street, the Adobe House, it had been emptied out. So 95% of what you see in there is period appropriate other antiques that was brought in. It's not the original furniture, it's not the original piano. But I was able to find out that the original musical instrument they did have there is now at the Natural History Museum. Score. But that still wasn't quite early enough for the people to have been studying piano since the 1820s. So then I went and I found out Long Beach, where they had the ships coming in, there were records of pianos in the 1820s. But this was like 4 or 5 days of my life lost, when I had the printers going, we're holding a spot for you, and my publishers like flipping out, and it was just awful. But so there was a lot of research like that, where you just had to do the homework and find out. So I'll find this last piece and then release you so you can eat and you don't black out, right? If I can, bear with me for a second. Maybe I can't. Maybe it's a sign that I just have to, sorry.
While you're looking, can I ask you a question?
You can.
So you might not like this question.
And those are the best ones, right?
Well, yeah. Well, because I'm asking you to pitch for your book. And so here's the question. So I'm one of those people that always, at all times, has never-ending stacks of books that I'm trying to get to.